part of being alone make you feel a little anxious? We're always chatting, sharing stuff, especially online. So, when was the last time you actually enjoyed your own company without feeling a little guilty about it? I want you to really think about that. We've been always told that being out there, wherever that is, with others, is what life's all about. We see it everywhere: friends hanging out together, people showing off their social lives on social media, giving us this impression that being alone is almost wrong. But even with all that connection, a lot of us may actually feel more alone than ever. And like many of you, I've been there. I used to wonder, am I missing out? Should I be out there more? Should I be filling my weekends with more get togethers and hanging out with friends? Should I be more like everyone else, the way they seem to be partying and living their best lives? And that's when I learned something important. It's perfectly okay to enjoy being alone. In fact, there's something deeply empowering about embracing solitude on your own terms. Today, I'm sharing what I've learned about solitude or being alone, why it scares us and what it really means, and how embracing it can be life changing. Now, some of you might be thinking, but hey, I'm an extrovert. I thrive in social settings. Absolutely, that's great. But here's a little secret. Everyone, yes, absolutely everyone, benefits from a bit of alone time. Extroverts, introverts, and everyone in between. It's really not about your personality. It's about giving your mind the space to process, rest, and rejuvenate. Think of it like sleep. We all need it, regardless of who we are. So I want to unpack this notion that being alone is something we should avoid at all costs if we have a choice. But first, let's understand the difference between being alone and feeling lonely. They might sound similar, but they're actually quite different. Being alone is just about physically not being with others, while feeling lonely is an emotional state where you feel disconnected, unloved, or isolated, even if you're surrounded by people. And the link between the two, being alone and feeling lonely, isn't as straightforward as you might think. It's totally possible to be on your own and not feel lonely. And believe it or not, you can feel lonely even when you're in a big group of people. What really matters is not how many friends or connections we have, but how meaningful these connections are. And what I've realized is that we are not actually afraid of being alone, we're afraid of feeling lonely. But to tackle loneliness, we need to shift our focus inward, inside ourselves, instead of searching outside for other people, for friends. We need to build a strong and positive relationship with ourselves instead of just relying on relationships with others. So I've discovered that when we're okay with being alone, we actually start feeling less lonely. When you embrace your alone time, you take a powerful step towards feeling more connected and less isolated. So, the first step to stop feeling lonely is to face and get past our fear of being alone. So, that's exactly what we are going to explore today. Why do so many of us fear being alone, and what can we do about it? I've learned that a big part of this fear comes from how our brains are built from an evolutionary aspect. Our brains are actually hardwired to want to connect with others. You know how people say we're social creatures? Well, that's just not talk. This need for social relationships goes way back to our early human ancestors. But it's important to understand the reason for this evolutionary wiring. It's more than just about having company. There's a deeper reason behind our social nature. Back then, if you were alone, you would have a tough time finding food or staying safe from danger. But if you were part of a group, you had a much better shot at surviving and finding what you needed to survive physically. So the brain started to be wired to think that being alone isn't so great for staying alive. And this in turn has made us really value being part of a group and to naturally fear being alone. Now, fast forward to today, and even though our physical survival isn't as dependent on being in groups, our brains still cling to this old pattern. We're kind of programmed now to one company, and this is why we can feel uneasy when we're alone. So, the fear of being alone isn't just about preferring to be with friends, it's an ancient survival tactic that our brains haven't forgotten. The thing is, our brains are pretty cautious by nature and don't easily let go of our old survival tricks that used to help us. So, even though our lives and environments have changed a lot, these old neural pathways can still kick in, stirring up fear and anxiety when we are alone. Understanding this was a game changer for me in the way I lived my life. It helped me to see that being alone isn't really unhealthy or dangerous in itself. Once we get that, we can then view it as not something to be worried or scared of, but as a safe place where we can grow and think about our lives. Now, another big reason we fear being alone comes down to our social conditioning, what we are used to, and the messages we get from society and marketing and ads. Our brains are already wired to look for social connections, and clever marketing really plays up this idea. You would have noticed how ads often show fun and happiness as something that happens in groups or at least with a partner. They tap into our brain's natural preference for wanting to belong. They do this because when we are in groups, our brains are subtly influenced by those around us, often leading us to spend more. This influence is just part of how we are built. We don't always make decisions as independently as we may think or assume. Social events are made to look super exciting, and living the good life always seems to be about being in exciting, fun, lively places or doing activities. And with social media, this idea is even bigger. So, all this non-stop imaging creates a sense of urgency and the dreaded FOMO, fear of missing out. It reinforces the idea that being on your own isn't good enough. The countless images of people having fun together makes us feel that if we are alone, we are missing out, we are unhappy, or we don't have social skills. And a lot of what we feel is shaped by these subtle, often unnoticed social cues and influences. Without even realizing it, we start to think that if we are not always around friends or don't have a partner or a busy social life, then we are not okay or I am not good enough. From my experience, it takes a real effort and strong will to go against the current. It requires one to question these ideas that society and marketing has drilled into our heads. It's about changing how we are conditioned to think. And that brings us to the third reason we might fear being alone, which is that society tends to view being alone as unhealthy. There's a common view that if someone is alone, they may be having mental health issues like depression or anxiety, or at least they have very poor social skills. But this is a big misunderstanding. While it's true that unwanted isolation can contribute to these problems, there's a huge difference between choosing to spend time alone and feeling unwantedly disconnected from others. Unfortunately, this difference often gets overlooked, and people think that any time spent alone is bad for mental well being. Choosing to be alone is about taking time for yourself, maybe to relax, think, reflect, or enjoy a hobby. It's a positive, self directed decision that can actually lead to greater self awareness and mental well being. But feeling unwantedly disconnected is when you feel cut off from others, not by your own choice, but due to circumstances or emotional barriers. This can lead to feelings of loneliness and isolation, which, if prolonged, might negatively impact your mental health. If you find that your alone time is no longer a choice, but is a situation where you feel trapped or you are persistently feeling sad, anxious, or disconnected, then you may need to reach out for help. Talking to a mental health professional can provide support and guidance to navigate these feelings. But the goal here isn't to always seek company or to constantly be alone, but to find a healthy balance that works for you. This takes us back to a crucial point I talked about earlier, the difference between being alone and feeling lonely. I want to emphasize again that being alone doesn't automatically lead to loneliness. Approaching solitude with the right mindset can actually make us feel less lonely. By focusing inward and building a strong, positive relationship with ourselves, paradoxically, we feel less isolated from the world around us. This brings me to the fourth reason why we may fear being alone, which boils down to two things: lack of self sufficiency and our need for external validation. Now, what do I mean by this? Just that we may not be used to supporting ourselves and instead we look for approval from others. Many of us aren't really comfortable being our own cheerleader or finding comfort in our own company. And society reinforces this message that happiness and self worth comes from others' approval. So when we're alone and we don't get this feedback from others, we can start doubting our ability to be happy or positive on our own. Because this is where our brain plays its sneaky role again. Without us realizing it, our brains get used to relying on others for our emotional well being or having fun or even a sense of purpose. So, just the mere idea of being alone can trigger anxiety. But this anxiety is actually an opportunity to work on becoming more self reliant, not just in daily tasks, but emotionally and mentally. It's about finding value and strength in our own company. We need to become better at being kinder and more compassionate towards ourselves and bouncing back when we may fail and motivating ourselves. So it's about learning to calm ourselves down when we are upset. By improving these skills, we can start seeing alone time as a chance to grow stronger and find out more about who we are. Because, contrary to popular belief, embracing solitude has many psychological benefits, including self reflection, creativity, and personal growth. It's in these moments of solitude that our minds can wander, reflect, and grow. Without the constant input and opinions of others, we can hear our own voice more clearly. We can understand our desires more better, our dreams, and even find creative solutions to big problems. And this self discovery can help improve your relationships with others as well. Ironically, when we are comfortable with being alone, we will also be in a better position to enjoy and appreciate the connections we do have. Now, some of you may still be thinking, why even bother changing our perspective on being alone? Can't we just have fun by being with others? Well, there will be times in our life when we will be alone, whether we like it or not. And if you haven't addressed the fear of being alone, you will have to deal with feelings of loneliness at those times. And more importantly, if you haven't realized it by now, there is power in alone time. Remember, it's about finding the right balance. While it's great to connect with friends and talk to others, being okay with just your own company is really important for your personal well-being and growth. I've learned that it helps you be more present, understanding, and empathetic when you're with others. So, how do you start seeing being alone as something good? Let's look at how you can make the shift and really start enjoying your own company. The great thing is you've already taken the first steps by watching this video. The next step is to consciously see any time alone as a chance to grow and feel good and not as something bad or a sign that you're not being social enough. When a negative thought or feeling about being alone comes up, consciously change your thoughts. Start to see those quiet moments as opportunities for self-discovery and self-care, as a peaceful space for your mind. Now, to make this change more tangible, try some simple activities that help you reflect and relax when you're by yourself. You could listen to music you love, or go for a leisurely walk, or do a hobby you love. Doing things you enjoy on your own can help you see the peace and clarity that comes with being alone. Remember, the brain may not let go of what it's wired to do immediately, but you do have the power to choose not to believe the narrative that you need to be surrounded by people any longer. So, anytime you feel down about being alone, remind yourself that alone doesn't equate to loneliness. Embrace the thought that you're not missing out. And if you're not yet comfortable with being alone, that's totally okay too. Learning to enjoy your own company is a journey. Start by exploring what you like and gradually find peace in your own space. So learn to treasure your alone time. It's a precious opportunity to discover and take care of your inner world. So next time you're alone, smile, knowing you're with the most understanding person you will ever know, yourself. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, share, and subscribe. Until we meet again, keep loosening those mental knots. True freedom is a gift we give ourselves, one thought at a time.